It means that we need to start talking about party. But before we actually talk about the after party, let me introduce you CoinSpade, who's actually inviting all of you to join their refreshing and amazing coffee that they're serving at their booth. Their booth is full of tech enthusiasts, so definitely there's a lot to talk about. Also, they're hosting a after party, or should I say pre-after party, at 5 p.m. today, right before the official one, and the venue is 5 minutes walk from here. So at Latitude59, you can check all of the information and join CoinSpade after party.
But don't get too excited just yet. We still have plenty of quality to deliver. And with that, let's continue with our next track, Future Society. Future is exciting, but we also have to be responsible developing it. And recently, many prominent thought leaders have even questioned whether or not we should continue developing the godlike AI. And to talk about positive technology development, I'm really pleased to invite Madelynn to the stage. Madelynn Martiniere has over the past decade worked with dozens of organizations to bring about ethical models of economical development, community design, and production of technology. Please welcome her to the stage.
I have one of these unfortunate career trajectories that makes no sense for introductions, so I really appreciate the elegant summary. So if there's one thing that I think is helpful to know about me, is that I absolutely need a clicker, which would be helpful. That's helpful to start. All right. So one thing helpful to know about me is that I am a huge science fiction nerd. That's the entire title of this talk. Just kidding. So I grew up in a family that loves science fiction. I had a dream of being a science fiction writer. Obviously, that career didn't pan out, or else I wouldn't be here. My father is a science fiction artist who most of you are probably unfamiliar with name, but I guarantee you have seen something that he has done. If you watch any major motion picture in science fiction in the last 2 decades, I don't know, Star Trek, Star Wars, Foundations, Ready Player One, I guarantee you have seen his work. So I grew up with this fascination around what the possible futures were, the what ifs. And it's one of the things that I love about the medium, whether it's written, whether it's in movies, whether it's film, right, is what is actually possible, not just from a technological perspective, but giving us a framework to really understand and unpack society and culture and power dynamics and bias. These things that are coming up increasingly in our conversations, but are difficult to come at when it's coming right in your face. Right? So I obviously didn't become a science fiction writer. I got into technology. I started working with engineers and designers and makers and anarchists and understanding that the technology was moving so quickly that the things that I was writing about, the things that my colleagues were imagining, were here right now. And so instead, I have dedicated my career to understanding what are the conditions for innovation for a thriving world. How do we come together to build technology that is moving society forward together? And so I've worked across a variety of countries and cultures. I've worked in disasters. I've worked with government. I'm really trying to unpack what is necessary for us to get to this next chapter in our humanity's future. And so we're not the only species that creates. We love to create things. How many people are entrepreneurs in this room? All right, fair bit, right? So as entrepreneurs, that's what we do. We build stuff, right? We're not the only species on the planet that likes to build stuff. We are the only ones that create so much meaning around the things that we build. It's our way of putting a dent in the universe. And so one of the things that has been most fascinating to me in my work is not just how do we create better, but how do we co-create better? How do we collaborate? How do we cooperate? How do we coordinate together? And some of the most fascinating and inspiring work that I have ever done has been in times of crisis, whether natural, whether man-made. It's one of my favorite books. If you've not read it, I highly recommend it. And Rebecca Solnit says, if paradise now arises in hell, it's because of the suspension of the usual order and the failure of most systems. We are free to live and act another way. You want to see a less somber example of that? Go to Burning Man. Go build Burning Man. Watch what happens when a group of people come to dust, and to dust they go. Right? One of my favorite examples that I love to use in work that we did after the nuclear reactor disaster in Fukushima, where the government was telling people to stay in their homes with massive amounts of radiation. They were going to come out with their Geiger counters, and they were going to tell people whether or not it was safe to stay in their homes. Guess what? They didn't. So what happened is a bunch of entrepreneurs and a bunch of makers and builders built open source Geiger counters. They put it on the internet. Everybody built it. They strapped it to cars. They drove around rural areas and created an open map of the radiation levels that's still available today, and it's still being utilized. That's co-creation. That's what's most interesting. So what's the biggest co-creative exercise that we've done as a species? This is the International Space Station, 1988. We're talking a ways back here. That's 15 countries, 10 years, $150 billion. Still operational. Biggest co-creative exercise of our species. And yet, it's the one thing that we've not actually been able to figure out. It's the one most impactful co-creative exercise that we have an obligation to address: the extinction of our species and our planet. And so in 2015, United Nations outlined the Sustainable Development Goals. I'm going to hope that everybody in this room is familiar with this, at least just passively. Right? This is a helpful framework. It helps us visualize what were the most key intervention and acupuncture points in addressing some of the greatest systemic challenges of humanity. 2015. So, lofty aspiration. We're going to achieve all these in 2030. So, in 2018, the number of the amount it was going to cost to actually solve this was $50 trillion US. That was 2018. Any guesses of what that is now? No? 195 trillion. So anything that we think about the work that we're doing and that we're making meaningful impact, and we're doing really cool stuff. We're building really innovative work for this. And yet, the math doesn't math. So I'm curious, all right, how many of you think, raise your hand, we're actually going to achieve the Sustainable Development Goals by 2030? Right? And I hate to tell you, I've been running the same exercise with folks whose entire job it is to solve this, and at most, starting even in 2018, maybe 30% of the people raise their hand, right? So why is that the case, right? And I want to push on this because I appreciate we're entrepreneurs, we're builders, we're working on the things that are our particular area of focus. But whether it's agriculture, whether it's solar energy, whatever you're working on, this, entrepreneurs, investors, this is the biggest market opportunity there is. This is not about philanthropy. This is not about charity. This is about commercial viability and the thrivability of our species. I think both of those things can actually go hand in hand. All right? So why don't we do this? Why are we still here? Right? Because we have to work together at a scale that is unprecedented. We have to collaborate, we have to cooperate, and we have to coordinate. We have everything we need. The money is in the market. There are brilliant entrepreneurs in this room and all over the world who have pieces of the puzzle. And yet, we are not talking to each other. So how do we do that? And how do we leverage technology to do that? So to do that, what's going wrong? I'm going to speak some very uncomfortable truths here for a minute as to why this is the case. And I'm going to tell you, again, it's not a technology problem. It's a people problem. All right? Number one, as a society, we're valuing the rights of individuals over the well-being of the collective. And I appreciate that can sound a little bit woo here, right? But remember what I said about values and culture and bias in the things that we build? Look at AI. It's been a big topic of this conversation, right? Like AI, the technology, is not neutral. Why? Because we're not. So we have to be constantly thinking about that. And I think this is more or less true depending on the culture that you're in, right? I moved to Europe from the US because the United States, right? And recognizing that the US, individualism is baked into the core DNA of that country's constitution, right? You go into some Eastern cultures, right? That's a lot, actually much more grounded in society, in family, right? But that's not what's getting imported into our technology. That's not what's getting baked into the DNA, right? So we have to think about how we do this. And part of the way is disincentivizing the myth of the heropreneur. And I appreciate that's uncomfortable in this space, right? But we talk about the heropreneur, the one person, and all that what they've done, right? But we don't actually talk about what happens at the collective level, what we're doing. Technically, we value competition over cooperation, right? We do. Our economy is built on it. Our society is built on it. The way that we raise capital for our ventures is built on it. And I was at an event yesterday, thinking in billions, as I'm talking about trillions here. And there was a lot of conversation about collaboration, right? And I love collaboration in theory. But if collaboration was going to get us there, it would have gotten us there, right? And the thing with collaboration is you don't have skin in the game, right? I've got my thing. You've got your thing. By actually collaborating, we're going to advance our things. But what's the shared thing? What is the shared mission? So when we talk about one of the organizations that I run, Zebras Unite, we are a cooperative by legal structure because we believe the entrepreneurs that we're working with should have skin in the game. So when we say things like that, we believe that our entrepreneurs, that our businesses have the power to imagine and co-create their future, we want to give them skin in the game, which means if we're not holding up our end of the bargain, they get to tell us so. It means they're interested in this work, right? And third is we value innovation over implementation. Implementation is not sexy. There's so many cool things, and it's really exciting. And first it was metaverse, and now it's AI, and it's all the shiny new techs and tools, right? But like implementation on a physical hardware, it's digging trenches. It's putting up solar panels. Digital infrastructure, it's APIs. I cannot begin to tell you how many technology companies I work with who are sitting on a trove of incredible data that we could learn from, that we could grow from. And I'm not proposing that they open source it. That's not always a solution. But I say, hey, maybe you could build an API. And they go, we'll get to it later. Guess what? They don't, because it's not actually built into the business model of what they're trying to do. So APIs, open data standards, ways that we can actually move innovation, make it liquid for us to actually learn what works and scale it up. All right. So how do we do this? How do we think differently? And for me, that's a move from what we call human-centered design, which I'm sure many people in this room are familiar, to humanity-centered design. It's around radical codependence. You and the work that you are doing, whether you're an entrepreneur, whether you're a funder, whether you're coming from a government and an intermediary, you are living within a larger ecosystem, right? Not just the planetary ecosystem, but the actual ecosystem with everyone else you're playing. So how you build what you build is just as important, if not more so, than what it is you're building. Because it's baked into the DNA. It's your culture. It's your legal form. It's what type of money you take. It's how you take that money, right? It's how you work with your stakeholders and your shareholders. So this is how we do it. We have to think and find ways to collaborate better, right? We still have to partner with aligned organizations and support each other in our mission towards shared benefit, right? We have to stop with the finger pointing. Like that was one of the things from yesterday, was it government looking to entrepreneurs to solve the problem and entrepreneurs looking at government to solve the problem. Neither of them are going to solve the problem. Collectively, we might get there. All right. We have to find ways to cooperate towards a shared purpose. There is no bigger shared purpose than the survival of our species. All right. So find those organizations, find those people that you want to cooperate with, and bake it into the DNA of your organization. And lastly, find ways to support that greater coordination. This can also get baked in. I cannot stress enough the importance of things like open data standards, APIs, innovation liquidity. Take the information that you're learning, take the measurements, share them wide, because your learnings are going to help somebody else. And understanding the work that we're doing is part of something bigger. If we're trying to row a boat in the same direction and everybody's going this way, we're going to sink. So, in the spirit of full circle of science fiction, one of my favorite authors, Octavia Butler, one of my favorite quotes of all time, all that you touch, you change. All that you change changes you. And the only lasting truth is change. And so at this moment, right here in this room, we're designing not only our future and our fates, but that of future generations. The work that you are doing right now matters. And so as entrepreneurs and as funders, we have the opportunity and the responsibility to think about our work in a greater context, to think about the societal fabric that we are impacted by and impacting. Right? And I love that. One of the core themes of this year in Latitude is impact, right? And it's super fitting. It's not about whether you are an impact venture or an impact investor. We all are, because we're all creating that impact right now. So the question and the challenge is, are you doing it intentionally or unintentionally? Are you doing it mindfully or are you doing it mindlessly? Right? Are you doing it with self-centeredness, or are you doing it with compassion? There's no risk. There's no risk in trying to find a way to work better together. The real risk is what happens when we don't. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Madelynn. Big round of applause one more time.